WeenCast, a Ween podcast with Rory Gibbons and Shane Prutzky.
Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Shane.
And this is Rory.
And this is WeenCast. Welcome.
Welcome
this is
everybody to another WeenCast.
Yeah. So this is the first episode. This will be episode 6, by the way. And this is the first episode the first new episode that will be available on iTunes. So we are so excited to finally have this thing up on iTunes. Previously, it was just available on YouTube. And we'll still make a YouTube video if there's anybody out there who, if that works, better for you or, whatever. We'll still have a YouTube video for this episode, but this is the first new episode that'll be available on iTunes, and we are super psyched. It's so cool to see this podcast up on iTunes. I just love it. I can't get enough of it. I'm sharing it with everybody that I see doing like #Ween on Twitter, and I'm sharing it with everybody who might possibly want to listen to it. So I just love it. So welcome.
Yeah, it's great, man. We're in 21st century, and we're getting this together, and we're finally on iTunes, and this is it's great, and we've been tinkering with the recording and just always trying to get better. Trying to get better.
So if this is the first episode that you're listening to, we invite you to go back and listen to some of the older ones. We've been trying to get better audio quality for each episode as we go along. So some of the older episodes aren't quite there in terms of the audio quality. We did what we could at the time. We've been doing this on and off now. It's been a couple of years. So like the first 2-3 episodes are from a couple of years ago, and we just did them kind of quickly and just sort of like, okay, let's just do this, and it's more about the conversation than it is the quality. But we're trying to have a good standard of quality from here on out.
I don't see anything wrong with a little brown.
Yeah, right. It's low.
I'm good with it.
It's lo-fi. You know what I mean? In the spirit of Ween, it's lo-fi. So there you go. We want to mention real quick before we go back and talk about the show from our past that we're going to talk about in this episode. We just want to mention real quick, we had given shout-outs to Boognish Monster, who is a awesome YouTuber and a good member of the Ween family and community. His name was Grant, and sadly he passed away recently. And we just want to say thank you to him for everything that he did, and he'll be sorely missed. And it's just sad when you miss a member of the Ween family, or you lose a member of the Ween family, especially someone like him who did so much for all of us. So we just want to say that we'll miss him and we thank him.
Yeah, and our thoughts go out to his family, and it's sad.
Okay, so we are going to go back in time tonight, and
back in time.
We're going to head north for this episode. This is Sunday night, 7/25/99, July 25th, 99. The Paintin the Town Brown tour has kicked off and is underway, and we were there. So,
the Warehouse in Toronto, Ontario.
The Warehouse was the venue for this show. We're going to go back and just talk about like how we got there and how we decided to get there. Rory and I were talking a little bit last night in preparation for this episode, and it's funny and a little bit crazy to me because when I think back on this, it didn't really dawn on me that I had seen 3 shows at the same venue in Philadelphia, and then the next show after that would be in Canada. That's,
when you put it like that, it's surprising.
Yeah. It's like I had to go back and look at my notes and the shows that I attended and everything to sort of like put that together. We had taken a trip to Canada after the last show that we attended, which was 1/1/99.
Yes, we alluded to that. We alluded to the trip to Canada during the last podcast.
Yes.
But the first trip to Canada was the morning, 5 a.m., the morning after the January 1st show.
Right. So we had taken a trip to Canada right after that show just for fun. Just strictly for the fact of none of us were 21 yet. And the legal drinking age, at least at the time, I'm assuming it still is, but at least at that time was 19. So we were all at least...
Oh, yeah. It was all about drinking underage.
Yeah.
For American standards.
So I think that might have been, your doing, Rory, of like, oh, we should go to Canada for like a long weekend and, drink legally.
Yeah, so I had this dream of, their drinking age is 19. And when I discovered that, I just had this dream that we got to get up there. Why not? I don't even remember how I heard it was 19 because the internet was formative back then. And so I don't think I was surfing on the web and I came across it. I think it's something I heard through the grapevine, like at college, like, oh, in Canada, it's 19, and so it was like, oh man, we should go. And I actually had this, I forget what it was called, but it was some kind of discount card where I paid like a yearly fee and I got all these like cool discounts on travel. And the first year was actually... It was a scam, basically. But the first year, it was free. And so I was like, oh, it's free. So I get these discounts on the rental car and the hotel. So let's go to Canada. But that was the first trip. And so this is July. The second trip up for the Ween show is July, which is, 6.5, odd months later. Which, as you mentioned, it's just surprising. Like, wow, the third Ween show for me, and the fourth one for you is suddenly in Canada when all the other ones were in Philadelphia.
Right.
And not only that, but we had just been to Canada. We were just 19 years old, and it was like, oh, we just were in Canada. Let's go back to Canada. Like, as a 19-year-old. I guess it's kind of crazy to think, wow, we threw together 2 trips all the way up to Canada within like 6 months of each other.
Well, I think what must have happened is when we had seen like the tour dates for the Paintin the Town Brown tour, however we got them, I don't know. But like when we were trying to figure out like, okay, can we make it to any of those shows? We saw that early on, Toronto was in there. I think it's like the 4th or 5th show on that tour. And we were probably just like, well, we just were in Toronto or right outside of Toronto. We can do it again. Let's go. That must have been...
It was an outrageous trip, too. I mean, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, the first trip we kind of got a little snowed in. There was a bad storm that like just before we had got up there. So we were driving around like in the snow like the whole time, and that was a pretty scary trip. We had rented a car, which we didn't realize until after the fact that you're not supposed to take a rental car across like the Canadian border. But we did. We didn't know that, and we did it, and no one like caught on to us or anything.
No one stopped us.
Yeah, nobody stopped us. I mean, they probably didn't even know like, oh, this is like, how would they have known that? Like, oh, this is a rental car. But it was just a regular like 4-door sedan, and somehow we got there and back without getting really stuck in the snow. I mean, I'm talking about there was like a foot of snow on the ground.
Yeah, it was a big storm for Toronto, as I recall.
Yeah.
But
luckily,
that was the first trip up.
Yeah, the first trip up. Luckily for us, there was a strip club which was in walking distance from the hotel, which was the Locomotion.
The Loco.
The Loco.
Gentlemen's club.
Yeah, gentlemen's. Right. I shouldn't have said strip club. It's a gentlemen's club. You know what I mean? So we basically went to the Loco at least twice. I think. It was kind of like the first time we had ever, obviously it was the first time we'd ever been in a place like that because we weren't even 21. We were just 19. And that's kind of what we wound up doing. There wasn't really anywhere else to go or anywhere else to get to, but that was within walking distance that we walked in the snow to the Loco. So that was the first trip up. And then for the second trip, we had gotten our friend K-Dog, who came with us to the New Year's '99 show. We had gotten him to drive in his mom's minivan. So.
Yeah, and so it was K-Dog, Mark, and the two of us.
Yeah, it was the two of us, K-Dog, and our friend Mark. So we were the ones that were like, okay.
It wasn't a minivan, dude. It was it was almost like a contractor van. You know, that you would, almost not a full-sized van, I don't think, but it wasn't a minivan, I don't think. It was like a contractor van, like you would use on like a job site for hauling around your paint gear or something. But it was, I think that wasn't the van blue, but the door panel, the sliding door panel was red or something.
Yeah,
like it was totally mismatched.
I think you're probably just thinking that because it was like a mismatched colored van. I'm pretty sure it was
that's possible.
I'm pretty sure it was still just a regular minivan, but yeah, it had like a red door because it was just like they were in some kind of accident or something with it, and they had to have the door replaced. So the whole rest of the van was one color, and then the door, I think, was like a maroon, like red. It was like a blue van with a red sliding door.
The reason, now that I'm thinking about it, the reason why I was thinking like a regular van, because it's not like a Chrysler minivan. It was some kind of boxy minivan. Like, I don't know what company, but like a boxier version, so a little van-esque.
Right. Well, and back in those days, I mean, they weren't very much to look at. Like now that we have two kids, like we have a minivan, and like it's actually not that bad looking. You know what I mean? But like back in those days, it was like it's just a minivan. Like, get over it. It's not any sort of like contoured shape or anything. But anyway, so he was nice enough to sort of like volunteer to drive us. So we didn't have a rental car for that trip, but maybe you had gotten us a hotel room then you or somebody else must have arranged the hotel accommodations, because I know I didn't.
Oh yeah, and so I got a hotel room in Mississauga, Canada, which is like one city over from Toronto. It's sort of like a big suburb, but it's its own city, and that's where we had stayed the first time we went up. Excuse me, and so, of course, even though the show was in Toronto, we totally were staying in Mississauga again so that we could be near the loco. And it was like the neighborhood that we knew. Because the first trip up was a snowstorm, we only went to a couple places that were like right next to the hotel because there's a foot of snow everywhere. So that was where we knew. So I was like, I'll just get a hotel up in Mississauga again, And then with the plan that we could take the bus and the subway from Mississauga down into Toronto, which is what we did. But
right.
Being as it's a this was our first like big trip for a Ween show, because previously they were all in Philadelphia. Of course, getting there was half the battle, right? And so, here we are in a mixed matched color minivan, like driving up through central PA and up through boondocks, New York, and we're cruising, we're having a good time, and of course we get to the border, and Shane, I know you'll have some to add to this as well, but we get to the border, and basically for some unknown reason, like the border crossing, they ask you their questions, they have a list of questions, and they kind of go through them. For some reason, K-Dog like lied about like everything. Like, I'm not sure why, because there was, like, no reason to lie. There was, like, no reason not to just say the truth. So like, the first question out of their mouth is, do you have any tobacco or alcohol? And, of course, we had all just bought, like, tons of cartons of cigarettes at the duty-free shop. And we may have bought beer, but I'm not sure. I don't remember that. But anyway, so, of course, K-Dog's like, no, we don't have any tobacco or alcohol on us. And they're asking us, like, where are you staying? And he's like, we're staying in Toronto, not Mississauga. How long are you staying? And he said 3 days. We were only staying 2 days. And so it was just like, I don't know why. He just was telling them all the wrong information.
Well, I definitely remember the first question was, do you have any alcohol or tobacco? And he said no. And from there on, it was just like, it was all downhill from there. You know?
Yeah, it was downhill because then they eventually asked that again, and then he answered yes.
Well, no, I think there was a couple of other questions. I don't remember exactly what they were, after that first question. And then it was a woman. I don't know if you remember that. It was a lady who was asking us the questions. And then she said, did you stop at the duty-free shop today? Because the duty-free shop is like...
that was
is
the
like,
follow-up question.
It's like 10, 15 minutes or so before you get to like the actual border. Like, there's the duty-free shop and you stop at, and then you drive a little piece, and then you get to like where you have to stop and like answer the questions. So he said yes, that we did stop at the duty-free shop, and then she said, what did you purchase? And then he said, just a few cartons of cigarettes. And that's when, it was like, okay, she just kind of like lost her patience with us and was just like, alcohol or tobacco? That was the first question I asked you. You're going to have to pull over. It was like, so if they don't just let you go, you have to pull over to the side, and there's a little building that you have to go in and you have to answer some more questions then.
Yeah, they make you pull out all your, sort of information. They, kind of take you through the ringer. It wasn't like super bad or anything. It wasn't like, the Seinfeld scene with Newman with the lights. But yeah, and then they search the vehicle, and of course we're just like, damn, they're searching the vehicle. You had to, they asked for the concert tickets because they asked what we were doing in Canada.
Yeah. So that part I remember pretty clearly is we were like inside the building, and I mean we were just at least I know I was like shitting my pants just because it's like, oh my God, like, and not that we really had anything to hide, per se, but it was just like, what are they going to do to us? Are they going to not let us cross? Are we going to be held up for that night and not be able to check into our hotel room? You never know. And I remember them saying, okay, you're here to see a concert, so where are your tickets for this concert? And I remember I had the tickets like in my backpack, so I had to go back out of the building, go into like my bag in the van, get the tickets and bring them in and show them to like the man who, was like questioning us.
Yeah, and I know, they searched the car, and then, you had to get the tickets, and then on the way back to the van, I remember, thinking, oh, we're out of here, and then they searched the vehicle again. But let's just say, they didn't find anything in the car. Everything's cool. Everything's cool. We got back in the car. We proceeded on to Toronto, to Mississauga.
Yes. So they had no reason to hold us anymore that they could find anyway. So they let us go, and and there we were. We were off to Canada once again.
Yeah, and so the so other important details in the lead up to the show is so the first night we were in Canada, we were just hanging out at the Loco or like at local bars and stuff, and apparently K-Dog lost his wallet or had it stolen by a female performer. And so when we got to the venue, the warehouse, K-Dog couldn't get in because he didn't have an identification. And I think it was even like 18 or older, and he was 20 years old, but he didn't have his ID, so they weren't going to let him in. And so Mark, excuse me, he took the bullet, I guess, and he's like, well, I'll hang out with K-Dog, so we're not going to go in. Now, you and I, of course, I would lie if I said there was even a split second where I was like, oh, I'll stay with you guys. I was like, no, I'm going in the show.
Well, I mean, I definitely felt bad for them, for K-Dog, because, I don't know what happened either, but apparently he had either lost or gotten his wallet stolen the night before at the strip club, and it was just kind of like, well, like maybe we can get in and maybe we can't, or maybe you can get in and maybe you can't. So that was sort of like the compromise that we had. I just remember you and I going in and like waiting to see if they could get in, and them being sort of like pushed over to the side, like, no, and there's a line of people behind you, and we are not going to hold up the line. Like, you got to get out of line.
Yeah, and Ritter, I felt bad for them, but Ritter was being a good friend, but
right.
I had a ticket, I had my ID, I was going into the show.
Yeah, well, I mean,
there wasn't any question. We just drove it's I think at least 8 hours for you from Reading, and I came from State College all the way to Toronto for a show. Like, I was going into the show.
Right. And, like, we talked about it after the fact. I mean, we didn't know that they wouldn't be allowed in, like, at all. But we talked about it after the fact, and we met up with them, like, after the show, and they were like, we've came too far for all four of us to not go into that show. You know what I mean? And it was, like, true that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, yes. I'm glad that it was you and I that got to go into the show. But yeah, it was like, we're not going to come all this way and then have all of us, you know, not go in. I do remember talking to one of the bouncers after you and I were let in, and we were pretty far up in line too. So we were in there like pretty early, and we were able to get like good spots and stuff. But I thought, okay, well, let me at least ask somebody. And I remember going up to this one bouncer and just thinking like, this guy is just gonna have absolutely no interest in helping us, or, you know, he's not going to do anything for us. But he was actually really nice. And I remember him saying what they might do is just basically have them wait to the side for, you know, like an hour or so, and then just let him in anyway. You know, like sometimes they just will wait until everyone is in, you know, everyone that has their ID and has their tickets ready and whatnot, and then they'll let, you know, like the stragglers in, basically. You know, that kind of thing. So it gave us a little bit of hope that they might still be able to get let in, but I think they probably just walked away, and they were probably like, let's just go find a bar or something, somewhere that will let us in, that we can, you know, still have a good time tonight.
Yeah, dude, I don't know. I just remember going in and being like, all right, I'm going to the show. Like, I don't think I spent another second thinking about whether or not they were coming in. like once we got inside the gate and we were standing there waiting for him, and then, you know, once the minute went by that it was like, hey, he can't get in, and Ritter said, I'll stay with K-Dog, and I was like, okay.
Right.
And I just booked it in, you know. But we got in there early, so we got right up front, and so that was good. So I think we're ready to kind of talk about the show. I think the venue, the warehouse, is like a rectangle, and my memory is that you come into the front, and it's like the bottom right of the rectangle, and the rectangle goes to your left, like long, and the stage is actually on one of the long sides. So the venue, when you're looking at the stage, is like wider than it is deeper, is what I remember. And I remember us being, at first, we were way up front, basically like right around the mosh pit area, because there were definitely some mosh pitty moments during some of the more punk rock songs. But the venue itself, I wasn't that enamored of, as I recall. That it was crowded. I remember being very crowded and cramped, and maybe that's also because we were way up front in a rowdy crowd.
Right. Yeah, definitely a wide place and not very like deep. One thing I do remember, like before the show started, is there were some younger kids that were like teenagers, a little bit younger than us, anyway, who were up front with us waiting for the show to start, and we were talking to them a little bit, and we were, for whatever reason, I remember asking them, like, so you guys down with the old shit? Like, you know, well, I am, so if you're not, then, you know, whatever. And just like being like a smart ass, you know, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's kind of a pretty pretentious thing to say.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
But I'll get back to that. You can finish your.
Yeah. And the one dude being like, oh yeah, like I brought along my proof, and he brought along his CD of God, Ween, Satan, and like had it like with him, like in the show, and like held it up for me. And I was like,
I bet he had it so he could hope to get it signed, you know? That's
probably, yeah. You know,
but you know, the go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it was just one of those things that like stuck out in my memory because it was like this dude actually brought the like CD into the show with him. You know what I mean? It was like that to me was kind of odd. You know.
Well, the funny thing about the whole interaction to me also is, so first off, this is your fourth, my third show. So it's still early on in our fandom. Like we haven't become proven hardcore fans yet in that way. But what's funny, though, is because we just drove like 8 hours or 5.5 hours, whatever, 6 hours for me, 8 hours for you, we were in there, and you gotta know that like 99% of the people at that show were from Toronto or from Ontario, right? Like,
yeah, right. Probably, yeah.
There were not too many people that were like, we're in Pennsylvania, we're gonna drive all the way up to Toronto to see Ween. So it already, in a pretentious way, like that we were like in there being like, what's up, Toronto? We came all the way from Philly or all the way from Pennsylvania. Like we're awesome. Like we're hardcore. Are you hardcore?
Yeah.
Are you into the old stuff? And that's so I apologize for that sort of behavior because that's
absolutely. Yeah.
That's kind of like
But I remember talking to those. I remember talking to those dudes and like, they were cool. You know what I mean? And like we're like having fun with them and whatnot.
Yeah.
All right. So then the show started. Do you want to run down the set list unless you have something else?
Yeah. Let me go down the set list. This is a pretty big set list. Buckingham Green. What Diener was talking about. Now I'm freaking out. The Golden Eel. Freedom of 76, Mr. Richard Smoker, Waving My Dick in the Wind, Fat Lenny, Mr. Would You Please Help My Pony, Dr. Rock, Pandy Fackler, Ocean Man, Ice Castles, Spinal Meningitis, Frank, Back to Basim, Roses Are Free, Mutilated Lips, She Fucks Me, Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy, Take Me Away, Powder Blue, Marble Tulip Juicy Tree, I Can't Put My Finger on It, Voodoo Lady, The Stallion Part 3, Big Jilm, She Wanted to Leave, Hot for Teacher, You Fucked Up, and then the encore is Piss Up a Rope, Booze Me Up and Get Me High, the HIV song, and then what we'll call, based on what Brown Bass says, and it's the improvisation, then North Pappy Flappy into LMLYP to end the show.
Nice.
I did not count up that list. It feels like it's longer than a normal show. The clock in time for the YouTube video is 3 hours and 10 minutes, and that doesn't include some of the downtime. So it was a long show. It was definitely a long show. With definitely a lot of content.
Yeah, I mean this is in like the golden age of like the long like shows, like the 2.5 to like 3 hour, plus shows. One of the things I was going to mention before we started talking about the show is, unfortunately, this is one of those shows. It's sort of like in between being like lost to the ages and not, because there is a recording of it, but it's not very good, and it's one of those ones where it's like, I have a good time going back and listening to it because I was there and I want to go back and reminisce and, and it's good for that. But it's like, if someone was to just go back and listen to a full-length Ween show just because, they, we're recommending it or something, it's tough, because it was like, yeah, it was a great show, but the bootleg of it isn't very good. So it's tough to say, like, we recommend you go back and listen to this one. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, it was a badass show.
It's for the hardcore fans only.
Yeah, okay. Hardcore fans only, because they did do some cool shit in it, but it's like, would you really have like some good enjoyment by going back and listening to this show and like the bad like quality of the bootleg? Maybe not.
It's a stretch. I say hardcore fans only because there is a lot of great stuff in this show that we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
and looking back, it's like the show is definitely better than I sort of remember it. But the recording, there's definitely a lot of buzz. It's kind of a low volume, so you turn it up and then there's got a buzz going on, so it's a little bit rough. The recording cuts in and out sometimes. Like sometimes it'll just like you feel like it just like cut off the end of a song, or maybe it cut off like 5 seconds in the middle of a song.
Right.
So there's definitely some parts where it's kind of cut up, and there's some parts where there's just like blank. There's no audio for like 10 seconds or something, and it's like that's obviously some kind of like someone splicing together the audio and did something wrong. So it's a little, so it's not the best, but it's out there, and there's definitely some really cool stuff, and definitely some things that would be worth going into, even if you didn't listen to the entire 3 hours and 10 minutes of the video.
Right.
I submit to you that when we get to it, there are, the last 45 minutes or so is probably worth every fan listening to.
Yeah, but, there's definitely some cool shit that, like, you should go back and listen to, if not the whole thing. Absolutely. So
let's I guess just look at some, just kind of go down some of the highlights of some of the songs and what was happening at the show. I of course, Buckingham Green is becomes and is in the process of becoming at this point like one of their like big songs. Not always an opener though, but I would say that what's like a nice early. So Ice Castles. I feel like there's still some things from the Mollusk that are, or I'm sorry, Ice Castles is White Pepper, and
right.
There's definitely like White Pepper isn't out yet, right? It's still like almost a year away.
Yeah.
And they're definitely they're starting to play many of the songs from White Pepper. These are still early times, so a lot of the White Pepper songs on here, it's like the 7th or 8th time, 10th time max that the song's been played. So these are all early renditions, and I love this Ice Castles because it first off, it starts really like slow and awkward because I don't think they're quite sure how they want to do it, and it's definitely a little bit different. There's like this jazzy piano; it's more jazzy, whereas I think the Ice Castles becomes more somber. The guitar is like a little like I don't know how to describe it except like it's like wobbly, like kind of going from note to note in a really interesting way. So I thought Ice Castles was fantastic. Do you want to touch base with some of your highlights?
Yeah, totally. So, like you said, you got some White Pepper stuff in there, which we haven't actually, gotten White Pepper yet. So some of those are still, pretty early. We talked about that in the New Year's show. So you got Pandy Fackler, Ice Castles, Back to Bassum. That might have been it for this show. But one of the things that sort of sticks out in my mind when I'm looking over this set list, and the fact that it was the Paint in the Town Brown Tour, you get a little bit more of those songs that aren't really from anything. Now I'm Freaking Out was thrown in there. It's just the third song. That was something that was that was not on anything. The White Pepper songs, like we talked about,
Booze Me Up and Get Me High.
And then this was the first time that we would see Booze Me Up and Get Me High, which that was a pretty big song, at least back then. I don't know how much, they really bust that out anymore, but in that, like, 99, 2000 era, that sort of started getting played a little bit more. You look on Brown Bass, it was it was only the 21st time that they played it, which is still pretty low. And then so
Roses Are Free is actually amazingly, this is the first time we're hearing it, and then also it's only the 7th time it's ever played, which I thought was absolutely amazing that we listened to it the 7th time, because now you just think of that as a song that's played practically every show.
Yeah, good call on that one. That's one that they didn't really they didn't really break out until like the fish thing sort of like started happening. And
don't get me started on that.
And Rory's not really a big fish fan.
No, don't misrepresent. Really quick for everyone out there, I swear to you, there's something about the farm or the barn. One of the fish, it's like a live disc and DVD, Blu-ray, and they perform "Roses Are Free" on the video in the video, and they nowhere in the booklet or in the credits of the video do they actually say like that's a Ween song. And I actually had friends who thought "Roses Are Free" is a Fish song.
Oh,
and
I'm sure there are
I'm
tons...
just saying, tread lightly.
I'm sure there are tons of people who are big fish heads that still to this day do not know that that's not a song that they did. People that just don't pay attention to that kind of thing. You know what I mean? Probably
I once
still
had a
think
friend.
That's a Fish song.
I once had a friend listening to Ween, and when they started "Roses Are Free," the friend commented, "Oh, they're covering Fish."
Oh, don't do it.
So anyway, but to have that, so yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. That's an excellent call because when you look at Brown Bass, that says 6. It's only the sixth time, 6 or 7 time that they've played that live. So that's crazy.
Well, you add 1 to that. That's how many times before.
Okay, right. So yeah,
although it might not be accurate. It could be off. Who knows? But
sure, right. But anyway,
Brown Bass is generally pretty good.
That is definitely one that they didn't really play live until like this era. You know what I mean? And it's like it's a Chocolate and Cheese song, which came out in '94. So that's an excellent point to bring up there. There's some other really cool shit in this show though, like we talked about Powder Blue, which is from the Country album, and they play that with the megaphone, like the megaphone vocals, like they do with like Frank or a couple of the other tunes on like a regular basis. But that is something that, and there again, total times played up until then 6. You know what I mean? 6. So like, that's really cool.
Yeah, and so it was one of the earliest times it was played, and it's also not a song that gets played a lot total anyway. So it's a pretty rare tune. It's funny because at the afterward, Diener comments it doesn't sound right, and he's talking about the country band. He's like, "Oh, it just doesn't sound right without the country," So it's interesting because that song before that's mostly just played during the country tour.
Well, and if you're looking at Brown Bass, it will tell you the date of the last time that was played, and it was 10/5 of '96. So basically, like that's the beginning of the country tour. So really, they must not have played that a whole lot through the whole country tour anyway. If it was 10/5.
Well, they didn't play it at the country tour show we went to.
Well, right, exactly. So, I mean, that's, you're talking, it wasn't until after 10/5 that the majority of the country tour happened. So Powder Blue must have been one that was just sort of left off the map for the most part on that tour. So that's really cool one to have played for this show. What else? You got
Marble Tulip Juicy Tree.
Marble Tulip Juicy Tree.
That's a pretty rare tune to hear live. I thought that was pretty awesome.
Yep.
Don't Get Too Close to My Fantasy is one of those ones ever since watching It's Just Pat. It's like that's one of my it's just like I love it when they play it live. I just it's one of my favorites live. Afterward, Diener commented, he was like, "That's the first time we ever played that in tune," and then he goes on to proclaim that it was the first time we ever played that, which isn't true. But it may have been the first time they ever played it in tune. Because, at the end of the song where they kind of all are like, sort of singing and it's all weird and crazy. But
yeah,
I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I love that song too. Yeah, absolutely.
Hot for Teacher. It's around the 20th time that was played.
Yep.
Of course, that's classic Claude singing, so that's always great. I wanted to also throw in that on Brown Bass, and maybe I'll go on the help page on Brown Bass. I don't know how you can correct things on Brown Bass, but they actually miss that You Fucked Up is the last song of the regular set. It's not listed on there, and also just a heads up on YouTube. I'm sorry, Shane. Who's the YouTuber with the
I think it's
the show?
Bugnish Bockwinkel.
Bugnish Bockwinkel. That You Fucked Up was also not listed on there either, but it's definitely there because they definitely say You Fucked Up many times, and it's the song. But it's funny because their way of saying like good night, like for the regular set, is Giner. I believe it's Giner goes, he's like, "Thank you. It was a pleasure servicing you," which is just ridiculous. And then it's like suddenly quiet. And like the recording kind of like takes a pause because they all get off stage and everything, and then it's like fast forward to the encore. And so the encore, to me, that really, as far as the parts of the show that, at the beginning I kind of said, look, if you would just listen to the last 45 minutes, as a hardcore fan, that's totally worth it because the end of the show is this crazy improvisation into North Pappy Flappy, into LMLYP. And first off, Shane, a couple days ago when we were kind of getting reviewing for this podcast, you mentioned North Pappy Flappy, and I kind of like, I hadn't yet looked at the set list, and I'm just thinking like, what the hell is that? Like, what's North Pappy Flappy? And of course, this show is the first time ever that it was played live, and it's also only played live like less than 10 times. So I don't know if you can quick check Brown Base, Shane, but yeah, it's played live like very few times, and it's the first time it's ever played. I can't help but think that had something to do with us being Canada, the Great White North, so North Pappy Flappy, throwing that out there. But that was just kind of really ridiculous. North Pappy Flappy starts out with, they're using like the talk box, and he's kind of like North Pappy Flappy, like a robot. He's like talking like he's a robot. And then they just start talking about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah,
so the improvisation is really like the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar jam, is kind of like what I would label it as.
It's funny because they start by saying North Pappy Flappy like a robot, and then they start just going into Kareem Abdul-Jabbar talking, just like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and all that. But then they kind of go back into the North Pappy Flappy part. But it's a pretty obvious segue into LMLYP. When you're listening to it, it's like, wow, this is obviously very funkadelic. And so it basically leads right into LMLYP, and it's a roughly 40 minutes. I want to say about 40 minutes total from the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar to the end of the LMLYP. It's just like one insanely long jam. Yeah, totally. Basically. Yeah. And they're all taking turns like doing solos. LMLYP in particular ends with just a lot of just amazing Claude solos, and at the very end he's even like just banging away at, I think, the bongos or something, and it's just like it's a really great ending to the show.
Yeah, totally. As far as North Pappy Flappy goes, I mean, it smells like poop and it sure looks crappy. That's all I really have to say about it.
If it looks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a duck.
I don't. That's not on God, Ween, Satan, though, is it? North Pappy Flappy? I don't think it is.
I don't believe so. I'm not sure what that's from. I think I'm just not. I didn't like actually research that, to be honest.
No, neither did I.
Podcast, but I don't really remember.
No, neither did I. I didn't like look it up or anything. But I think I had a tape that someone had made back in those days. Like, you still had the cassette tapes that you would get like in the mail and stuff. And someone had made me a tape of like demos and B-sides and stuff. Which, any Ween fan knows there's like thousands of them. You know what I mean? You can really go down a rabbit hole when it comes to like Ween, B-sides. But I think that was on there. So I do sort of remember it as like being a quote-unquote song, before this show happened, but barely. You know what I mean? Barely. So
I
it's just kind of one of those.
I may have known about it at that point. I don't know.
Yeah, just like one of those.
I certainly forgot about it for 18 years.
Yeah, and it's funny because when you click on the song itself on Brown Bass, it will say live debut 7/25/1999 in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I mean it's just a
That's
little
art.
like it's just a little thing that they like, sort of threw in there. And it's technically, again, when you look at Brown Bass, it's only been played 4 other times after that. Between 99, one other show in 99, 2 other shows in 2000, and then it must have been when they came back in 2016, Denver, Colorado. So it's like...
So, that's amazing
ridiculousness.
because it kind of is a badge of honor to be at a show. First off, to be at a show where a song is played for the first time ever is pretty cool. And this is the first time that's happened for us. I'm interested as we continue through more podcasts. It'll be interesting to see what other songs that might happen to. Like maybe this is the only song that we ever saw for the first time ever.
I think when you get to some of like the Quebec stuff, I think I was at a couple of shows where they played a good chunk of the Quebec stuff for the first time. But we'll get to that. We'll get to that in the future.
In due time. That's we got a few shows between now and then.
Exactly, in due time. But yeah, North Pappy Floppy is just a real simple little. I dare to call it stupid, but it's
it's amazing. It's brown, and
totally
it just
brown.
ends up being a huge intro into LMLYP. It's just fun and irreverent, and it's total Ween. But it's amazing, and it's only played live 5 times ever. So that's not a lot of people who can say they went to see that live, I guess.
Yeah, totally, man. A couple of things that happened during the show that I had remembered and made a couple of notes about. So those dudes who we had gotten to talk to a little bit, who were up front with us for the majority of the show, they straight up just came out and told us it was their first Ween show, and I remember those guys were being pretty rowdy and trying to not rowdy in a bad way, but they were definitely having fun and going crazy and stuff. And
there was definitely some mosh pit stuff going on.
There was some mosh pit stuff
during the punk rock songs.
Yeah, there was some mosh pit stuff going on, but those dudes had come for a good time. You know what I mean? And they had brought with them a couple of signs that they had made where there was 2 pieces to it, and the one side said Gene and the other side said Dean, and then you flipped them over, and the one piece said Doctor and the other side said Rock. So they were holding up, 2 of these guys were holding up these throughout the show, and they must have had them flipped around. So when you're listening to the recording, Gina at one point is just like, "What's going on here, Dr. Dean?" And then they got their shit together real quick, and they're like, "Oh, I get it, Dr. Rock. Oh yeah, okay, nice," or something like that. And then there's another point where one of those same dudes, and we're right up front. So one of those same dudes held up his camera, and it must have been a regular old school camera, because this is before the days of digital cameras. Held up his camera and was like, "Jeaner, take my picture." And I don't know, I think Jeaner might have been a little thrown off at first, and I don't know what he thought he was handing him or whatever, but you can hear him go "Oh, no way, man." And then he realized, oh, he just wants me to take his camera and take his picture. So then he picks it up and takes the dude's, he's standing on stage holding this guy's camera and taking a picture of him in the crowd. Just pointed the camera straight down at those dudes and took their picture and then handed him back the camera. And then you hear Diener go, "Oh, you're so good to the people. You're so good to the people." And I think
such benevolence.
Yeah, and I think there was an image that someone had taken. Someone had taken a picture of Jeaner taking that picture, because I remember there being one image of Jeaner holding a camera up to his face, pointing it down into the crowd. I'll have to see if I can find that. But for the longest time, I remember that floating around in the early days of the the Ween news groups and stuff. was pictures that were taken from that show, and that was one of them. There's a couple of other really cool quotes that I had marked down. At one point, I don't remember which, where it is exactly in the during the show, but Jeter just says, "We're gonna be here for as long as it takes." I like that a lot. What else? Oh, for Back to Base, when they say deep space, we're gonna go into deep space here.
Yeah, deep space here.
Yeah.
For Frank, Diener goes to the crowd. He's like, "This is an easy one. This is an easy piece of shit." And then they play Frank, and then afterward, they're sort of like winding it down and getting ready for the next one. And he's like, "That's how we like to do it," which is great because Frank is such a Brown song.
Absolutely. That's
and you think about also, if you're Ween, they haven't been to Canada all that many times before this. Certainly not as the 5-piece band, and so it's certainly not the middle of their fan base, So it's funny because it's like, oh, we're gonna play Frank. In that context, you think about a lot of the stuff that's being played, and it's kind of like pretty Brown, and it's like it's great,
Yeah.
I guess you get that because it's like a Paint the Town Brown show, so they're playing like a variety of stuff. I think intentionally because they're trying to have a variety of stuff to pull from for the Paint the Town Brown album. But I think it's just great when you're hearing him say that, and it's like, yes, Frank is representative of Ween. like this is Ween. It's like, don't forget these kind of songs when you're showing people what Ween is. Don't forget Frank.
Yeah. You got to get some of that Brown, lo-fi sweetness in there as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember, we, like I said, we were up front for the majority of the show, and then towards
most
the
of
end,
the show.
Most of the show, and then for maybe the last like half hour or so, we went kind of back and used the.
Well, dude, it was crowded up there. It was hot and sweaty.
Oh yeah.
So.
Yeah. No, I mean I'm not saying we like bowed out or anything, or we're a bunch of punk asses for getting out of the crowd or anything, but it's like eventually you just have to get out, get some air and use the men's room and whatnot. But I remember, I think you had gone to the bathroom and I was waiting for you or something, and you like came back and you were like, "Oh man, there's a lot of like really fucked up people here." And I was like, "Really?"
Yeah, dude.
And then you were like, "Yeah, I just saw some dude like in the hallway on the way to the bathroom, like shaking, like just like eyes closed, like just like rocking back and forth and like shaking."
Yeah, dude. Like it's a vague memory when you mentioned that. I brought it back, but like sweating and shaking, like he was just like having like coming down off something, or like dealing with a bad trip or something.
Yeah,
And there was that place. It was packed. It was hot and sweaty, and a lot of people came to get crumped. like people. That's one of my memories of it. And at the time, only being like 19 years old or 20 years old. 20 years old at the time, we're still pretty young, and not like totally like I've never was exposed to that kind of crazy stuff before, like even going to shows in Philly, I don't remember that much. I just remember the warehouse being gritty and just kind of intense back there.
Man.
Like back by the bathrooms, it was like the weird quiet back where like all these, just a lot of people were just, not looking too good. Not looking too good.
Yeah, I remember that was that was one of the first times I was ever sort of like exposed to that kind of stuff, and it was just kind of like, I don't know what those dudes are on or whatever, but I hope they're okay. It's like I'm not gonna try and talk to them or help them, or I wouldn't know what to do.
If you're a parent, you should definitely chaperone your child, your teenager, if they want to go to a Ween show. Just out there, the public service announcement. If you're over the age of 18, then you're an adult and you can make your own choices.
Yeah.
But dude, yeah, it was a good show though. because I never had the recording of it, and because the recording is not good, it's not like I have a lot of memories of it in terms of like listening to it a lot or anything. And so we've been to a lot of shows, and so sometimes some of the shows they start to blend together in my brain. And
Yeah.
but what I would say is this show was way better than I remembered it. And it's a shame that the recording is just not that good. You can't do anything about that now. That was almost 20 years ago. And so it's a shame the recording's not that good, but it was actually a pretty good show. It actually had, the North Pappy Flappy LMOIP obviously is a great highlight, but also some of the other tunes, Powder Blue and Marble Tulip Juicy Tree, and, just hearing them rock out, a whole bunch of White Pepper songs almost a year before White Pepper came out. It's like there's some good stuff going on.
Yeah,
here. There's some really good stuff.
Yeah, there was some good shit in that show, and I agree with everything that you said. I think it was a long time before I had actually gotten the bootlegs. I did get it like the CDs of it that someone had made for me and sent to me. But I don't think it was until like maybe a couple years later, and by that time it was kind of like, oh yeah, whatever. And I can tell that the show that's on YouTube that's been uploaded to YouTube is the same as like the bootlegs that I have. And it's a shame that there isn't a higher quality version of it out there. Maybe there is. Maybe someone has a better quality version of this show. We'd love to hear it. So please,
but can I also just throw out there too? I mean, I don't want to be raining too hard on someone. Like every podcast we put out there hasn't been the best quality. And you know what? Someone was out there, 19 years ago, trying to do what they feel is right, trying to get a recording of this Ween in Toronto, this crazy band. Let's get a recording of it, And they did the best they could. And was it the best recording? No.
Oh my God! I mean,
could they have done? Sure, but you know what? Thank you, whoever made that recording. Right. Thank you, because of you, I got to listen to the show again and remember how good it was, and sort of, and all the things that surround that. And so.
Yeah, I mean,
that's what these podcasts are all about. It's this journey.
Yeah, good call. I mean, good call. I don't mean to dog on anybody that makes the recordings or anything like that. I respect and admire everybody who makes the audio recordings. And I mean, it's like I said in one of our earlier episodes, that's doing God's work. That's hooking up your fellow fans and your community, you know what I mean? And it's because of those people that we get to go back and listen to this stuff at all, so we don't mean to dog on anybody that, made that recording, and you're absolutely right. So yeah, there's definitely some cool shit for this show, and it's a shame that there isn't a better recording of it out there like there is with some of the other shows. That's all we're saying.
But I'm still thankful that, I'm sure we'll come across a show that we don't have a recording to refer back to.
Right.
Or maybe we won't, but I'm guessing we will. And so I'm just glad that we had this. But yeah, dude, that's kind of my final word on it.
Yeah.
Some great moments, some great stuff going on. This is like a time period for Ween where the 5-piece band is just really humming on all cylinders. White Pepper's still in the future, but they're laying down. They're getting used to playing. They're like really heading into just a multiple year period, I think, where they were just really on top of their game. And so it's definitely something to behold. It's a little bit of an earlier time period, obviously, and so it's kind of like you don't have Quebec, you don't have those things, so it's like it's kind of it's got an earlier focus. And so it's got a lot to recommend it.
I want to throw in one other quick memory. We had gone, after we had gotten out of the front and had gone, back to the back, we went and got T-shirts. At least I got a shirt, which was the front. It just says, Paintin' the Town Brown, Ween Summer '99 Tour. It's made to look like the front of the Paintin' the Town Brown album. And on the back it has the tour dates, Ween Summer '99 Tour. And all the way at the bottom, on the last supposed stop, it just says Brownsville, PA, And I remember, we were looking at the shirts, and you asking the guy who was, like, selling the T-shirts, where is Brownsville? Where is Brownsville, PA? And the guy was like, it's a joke. And it was like, oh. Because, of course, in our mind, we're just like, oh, we're going to go to that, too. It's like, if it's in PA,
it might have been also, I never heard of it, like, being from Pennsylvania.
Right.
And then there's like, wait a minute, where's Brownsville,
Yeah. I don't know if you would remember that, but I remembered it. No,
that's funny. That's hilarious.
Yeah. And you didn't. I don't think you got one of those shirts, but I did. I still have mine.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it's just like the beige shirt that's made to look like the front of the Paintin Brown double album. So it's a cool shirt. It's a little on the plain side, but it's still a cool shirt.
I have a lot of regrets around Ween shirts and not getting them or losing them.
I did a lot of buying them and then wearing them here and there and trying to quote unquote take care of them. A lot of that was because I was too fat to fit in a lot of them and just like putting them in the bottom of my drawer and just like, oh yeah, maybe one day when I lose 10 pounds, I'll be able to fit in that again. So
the wishful thinking drawer.
Yeah. So I have a lot of shirts that I only wore like a handful of times and just, held on to throughout the years. But
yeah, that's funny.
I do remember asking the guy about Brownsville, PA. That was a good memory. But yeah, man, that was it. And we made it home in one piece. The bottom line is we got up there, we had a good time. At least you and I did because we got to go into the show and we got home and
we went to the show.
It home in one piece.
Yeah, man, another trip to Toronto in the bag, and it was fantastic. It was a great show.
Yeah.
This was the second time that year that we saw Ween, and we'll go back to see him 2 more times. So it's interesting. This tour, this Paintin Brown tour, the next, I don't know if it won't be the next show that we actually talk about, but the next show in our chronology is, what's the date for that? It's the Electric Factory.
Yeah, the Electric Factory show.
August 28th. And then we also see them on a, I guess it's some kind of fall tour or winter tour or something at the Tralfamadore in Buffalo, November. So
yeah, that was like the fall tour then.
Yeah, and so that year we had 3 different kinds of tours that we ended up going to see them. And, so it's also interesting when you think about where we are as fans too. So from the point of going to see them January 1st to this show, we obviously made a decision when we saw that they were coming back out again. And we saw Toronto, and we were like, dude, we just were there. It rocked. Let's go back again. Let's do this again. Let's go see Ween there. When we made that decision to say, we're going to drive like this 6-8 hours drive all the way up to Toronto, we made a step and said, we are going the distance. We are taking this to the next step, right? Like we're not just going to be content to go see them in our local clubs in Philly every time they come to Philly. Like we made a decision. We are going to start seeing them like whenever they're sort of anywhere in like the general like mid-Atlantic vicinity, like we made a decision that we are going to start pushing the envelope as far as how far we'll go to see them and the lengths that we'll go to see them. And so I love that. It's like us just laying it out and saying like we are committed to this, because at this point this is still only your 4th show, my 3rd show. Obviously now we're up closer to 40, and so it's a totally different view, right? But it's like this is when we made that decision. This is when we decided to go in the deep end, and and it's awesome. There's some shows that we traveled further to go see, later on. But this is one of the longest trips, and to leave the country for just a couple nights to go see the band you love, I think that says a lot about who we were at the time and who we wanted to be as Ween fans. And so it's awesome. And so this show really does have holds a special place in my memory because of that.
Yeah, and I think we were starting to get a sense of, you go see these guys and it's going to be good, and it's going to be different, and you're going to have fun like each time, no matter what.
Yes. Yes.
So by this time we're getting a real sense of that, and it's like the more we go, the more cool shit we're gonna hear, and and the more fun we're gonna have, basically, and that's that. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, dude.
we're definitely making a decision to go to more shows, and if we can make it, we're gonna try to make it.
Yeah, dude. Speaking of more shows, so unless you have anything else to say about this one, our next podcast will most likely be for the upcoming Pittsburgh show, because I will be attending. My wife and I will be attending that show with my brother-in-law up in Pittsburgh. So
nice.
That's going to be awesome. It's at the AE stand or AE club. I don't have that detail, and that's July 27th, I believe. And yeah, so the hope is we'll put out a podcast a couple days after that, probably, to talk about that show. It's exciting. Absolutely. It's exciting that they're back together and that they're doing these little mini tours. And so that's for me right now. That was the closest one that I could get to. So yeah, I'm excited about that. And then who knows what the next one will be. That will keep you a little in suspense on that, as far as like where we go then. But anytime we intersperse a live show, today, we'll be sure to take a break from whatever else we're podcasting to talk about that one if we go to it, because that's where it's at.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Yeah. So hit us up. It's weencastpodcast @gmail.com. And also on Twitter is the same thing, @WeenCastPodcast. We had mentioned at the beginning, hopefully from here on out, we're going to have everything on iTunes and also YouTube. Go ahead.
Yes, we'll be on YouTube and we'll be on iTunes.
Yes.
So we'll keep doing those. Will be two places you can find us.
Yeah, if there's anywhere else that we can access easily. Oh, and also archive.org. So we're gonna have all the shows will be uploaded to archive.org. All the past episodes are uploaded to archive.org now. So if that works for anybody better than iTunes for whatever reason, hey, that's awesome. So we'll continue to try to do at least those things, and continue to grow the show from there. So if anybody wants to say anything, if anybody wants to send us any email, we love hearing the comments. We love hearing the feedback. So hit us up.
Yeah, man. If anyone was at that Toronto show and you want to throw something in that maybe we missed, or more insight, or just whatever, or you were at the Paint the Town Brown tour, comment. But you put a comment on YouTube, email us, Twitter, wherever. We love to hear the comments and get other people's perspectives as well.
If you were one of the kids that we were hanging out with at the front of the warehouse, who had brought along your CD and were holding up the Jeaner and Diener signs and the Dr. Rock signs, dude, please send me something.
Yes, and if you were the guy, and if you were the guy sweating and shaking in the bathroom, I hope you're okay, man.
Yeah.
I hope you made it out. I hope you made it out. But yeah, man, I think that sounds like a wrap here, bro.
All right, sounds good. Well, thank you. Anybody
Awesome.
that's listening to this, thank you so much for listening.
Yeah, thanks everyone, and hope you enjoyed, and peace be with you.
All right, we out.
Bye.